So here we are at the end of 2023 with my self-proclaimed predictions being proved right. If I'd done one of these videos last year in 2022 at the end, I don't want to blow my own trumpet. In fact, I can't play the trumpet, I don't have a trumpet, and I wasn't going to print a comedy trumpet just for this one pun. And that's why I'm doing this for proof this time. Although I have to say 2024 is going to be, I think, a lot harder to predict, so let's get on with it. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. This year saw an insane number of printers released, and I'm not kidding, possibly the most printers ever released in a given year, although I would have to count them, and I don't have enough fingers, and I don't have enough toes. Some highlights were the very early Qidi X Smart that managed to lead the charge of the Core XYs that were to follow. There was an influx of very fast printers. Even bed slingers were claiming that they could do 500 millimeters per second. I mean, maybe they can. I think the fact that they can doesn't necessarily mean that they should, but that's not what this video's about. The Prusa Mark IV was announced. I don't remember the exact date for that. I feel like it was around June. And that was released, and even I managed to blag one. Look, here it is. I don't think it came out of nowhere. We knew it was coming, but they announced it and released it without any kind of run-up, if that makes sense. And of course, this was the year that Creality released a lot of printers. That's not entirely unusual, but I think they released more this year than previously. But the flagship K1 series appeared, and that definitely happened. There was a lot of hype around that, and a lot of other things. But about firmware, the rise of Klipper was exactly as fast as I expected it to be. In 2021, Klipper was, I think it's fair to say, it was an obscure firmware that only the Voron crowd were really using as standard, and definitely no commercial machines used it at all. So if you wanted to use it, and a lot of people were using it on things like Enders, you could. I did, but that was a niche. And by the way, that is how it's pronounced.
Niche. Niche. Niche.
The first commercial Klipper printer was the FLSun V400, and that sneaked out the year before this one in 2022. But then nothing really else happened until the BQ Huracan, which really did sneak out, and there was very little fanfare, even though I thought this was a highly notable machine because I could see that it was the first actual legit open full Klipper bed slinger where they were literally providing you with an open source board and saying, look, here is a machine that uses the BQ the Big Tree Tech Manta with the CB1. But broadly speaking, people ignored it because apparently there's no prizes for being first, especially if you use a Bowden extruder, which I think was probably, in hindsight, not the best idea, and I think that might be one of the reasons why people didn't engage with that printer. Even though it was okay, I thought so, I still have mine. But then 2023 happened and every single machine started suddenly using Klipper, just like that, overnight. Going from 2 machines up to midnight on December 31st, 2022, we just went straight into every machine nearly. The only 2 machines this year that I've reviewed to use Marlin were the Ender 3 V3 SE and this Mingda. There were others, I'm sure, but you get the idea. Everyone else was shifting in 2023 to enclosed Core XYs because of the undeniable success of Bambu's X1 series the year before. And what did Bambu do? They released the P1S. But then Bambu released 2 bed slingers, which seemed to be outstripping the sales of every other machine. So this kind of feels like it's leaving the rest of the manufacturers wondering what on earth is going on. Why are people buying Bambu machines, even if they're bed slingers? And I've got a hint, if you're a manufacturer watching this, it might not be the kinematics of the printer, it might be this bit. Anyway, I think that's enough of the history. Let's get on to 2024. I think first and foremost, in 2024, we're going to see a roughly 70-30 split of enclosed printers and bed slinger printers as the market heads towards an even spread of what will eventually be bed slingers on the cheap end and enclosed Core XY style printers on the expensive end. And obviously some variations of that, but I think that's going to be the theme. If you think about it, that makes sense. Bed slinger printers are cheaper to make and they pack into smaller boxes for shipping, but Bambu and Creality both showed that there is definitely enough demand for higher end enclosed printers, especially if they manage to also do multicolour. Prusa seems to be proving there's people with even more money than that. Nice if you can. And if you're one of them, don't forget to use my affiliate links. I don't actually have affiliate links for Prusa yet. I'll be honest, if I had the money and the space, I would definitely buy an XL. There's nothing else on the market like it right now, so fair play to people who can. Some companies, I'm sorry to say, this coming year, they might actually disappear. The market is getting much more competitive, or rather, the market is getting more mature, and there's a segment of printers that nobody really wants, and it's kind of like the elephant in the room. There are outdated mid-price bed slingers running Marlin that companies are still kind of trying to sell, and I'm sure they sell some, but these companies are either going to have to adapt and stay profitable, or they're going to have to go and do something else. And we've seen one manufacturer in 2023 pivot entirely to a completely different product line. Colour printing could be on the rise next year. It turns out that colour printing is not a fad, which, as much as I'd like it to be, and the reason I say that is because it's really wasteful in the current iteration. There are ways to do colour printing that aren't wasteful, but unfortunately those are more difficult, more expensive, and more limiting in terms of how many colours you can have. I know some things about the plans for colour printing that some companies have, but I can't share those at the moment. But I will say, don't expect too much, or rather, don't expect a flood of colour systems in the same way that Core XYs were in 2023. The reason is making a colour changing system is hard, and it requires a lot of development, and it's expensive to do that, and making it work well is even harder. Those that we see next year will almost certainly be plagued with problems, at least initially. Also worth bearing in mind is that the Prusa Mark IV MMU3, the MMU3 is already out for the Mark III, so it's complicated. It's requiring some adjustments for the Mark IV. There is a blog article out there on that, but that is imminent, very imminent, I'm hearing. I've got one on order, so you'll be hearing about that when I get it. I will undoubtedly be covering it. I think this coming year, most manufacturers, especially the smaller ones, they will start to diversify a lot more. Primarily, I expect to see a lot of companies shift into accessories or maybe parts and kits, but especially I expect to see more companies diversifying more seriously into filament. There's a huge markup in filament, at least that's what I understand, and I don't think demand for filament is going anywhere soon. We've seen a bit of this with Elegoo, Creality, Sovol, and of course Bambu have always sold their own filament, but they are increasing that recently. They've increased the range with glow in the dark and colour changing. I expect more of this shift to printer manufacturers selling their own brand filament in 2024, and maybe they will also sell things like dryers and stuff like that. The reason I'm predicting this is because there's kind of this phenomenon when you have a small number of dominating brands, which is the way we're moving, I think, and other brands start to sell accessories for those brands. If you think about how games consoles work, you have a small number of brands that make the consoles, and then you have a ton of brands around that sell accessories and things like that on the side. And I think we might be starting, just very much starting to move in that direction with 3D printing. Case in point being Big Tree Tech is making screens for the Bambu. I don't know if that's secret or not, sorry if it is. E3D is making hot ends for the Bambu. Next up, let's go into the predictions of what I'm going to make using PCBWay's services in 2024. That is a really good segue. I am proud of that one. I don't have an answer though, because I'm probably just going to do whatever I feel like. That's why it's so easy to use PCBWay. PCBWay are a manufacturing service who can help you make small runs of prototypes or products that you are unable to on your home equipment. Although their name implies that they make PCBs, which they do, like this one or this one, and they can populate it like this for you too. But they also offer other things like CNC machining or sheet metal cutting and folding. And you know what? 2024 is going to be the year where I start tapping into this and learning how to prepare files for sheet metal cutting and folding. And I think you're all going to come along with me for that ride. I think that is definitely something that I want to happen this year. Getting things made by PCBWay is super easy, and their website guides you through the whole process, so don't worry if you aren't too sure about what you're doing, or if you're like me without a formal engineering background. That is true, you'd never guess, would you? Anyway, make sure you click the link below and go check them out, and there's a coupon for new customers if you do that. Thank you, PCBWay, for sponsoring this episode, and let's get back to it. So I think in terms of firmwares and ecosystems, there has been this huge shift towards the combination of clipper and a skinned slicer. A lot of the manufacturers have done this, and whether you like it or not, I think this will probably go further in 2024. I can see manufacturers actually even starting to think about making their own slicers. The thing is, this integration of machine firmware and slicer and even cloud is at least partially user-driven. We as users are apparently demanding it. Even if you are sat there yelling at your screen right now saying that you don't want it, the market evidently does. And this is what manufacturers are going to respond to. Does that mean more closed source machines? I think in the longer term, probably yes. Yeah. I'm not really that into resin to really be able to predict what's going on there, but I think there's a good chance that not a lot will actually happen with resin this year. I think one of the really cool things I've seen on resin printers is the pumps that you can use to remove the material back into the bottle when you're finished. I would really like to see that being a standard feature on resin printers because it seems a lot less messy, and it seems like it's almost a safety feature, if that makes sense, because it's going to cut down on spills a lot. Beyond that, I have no idea. I don't know if screens can get more resolution or whether they need to, whether it will help. But yeah, I'm completely outside of my area of expertise here. A few related things to finish up. I don't know if you've noticed the recently introduced Sunlu S4 dryer that I showed on the channel. This used a new method of heating. It used PTC heating instead of the slower old resistive circuit board, and PTC heaters are sort of quite well used inside printers now. I think we're going to see a lot of those next year because they just perform better, they heat up faster. These kinds of dryers will inevitably be spec'd with higher maximum temperatures because the filaments we're using are more diverse now, with people wanting temperatures up to 70 or 80 C for drying. You absolutely don't need those temperatures, but people don't believe a single word I say about how dryers work, and I've got into so many arguments over this. This is not how humidity works at all. I think dryers are going to get smarter in general too. There's this sort of wide open market for that. It wouldn't surprise me as well if these dryers start to get internet connected. We need apps for dryers, I'm sure. We haven't got enough apps on our phone, but again, this is something that's going to happen because it's the natural evolution of things. Going back to filament, an interesting side note with regard to filament reels, especially in the USA where the reel sizes differ a lot more than they do over here. With the popularity of the AMS Lite, and it was already a problem with the AMS, but even more so with the AMS Lite, I think we might start to get more standardized filament reel sizes. If you want to sell to Bambu users, and there are more Bambu users by the day, so you have to make a reel that fits, otherwise the Bambu users are just going to buy Bambu filament. So I think we're going to see a really rapid movement towards a standard filament reel size, which is an interesting outcome of Bambu making that device. So I'm going to finish up there, and I'm going to put my predictions on screen here now, and let's meet up in exactly a year and see how close I got. And if I'm wildly inaccurate, I'll just pretend this never happened and not make an episode next year. Anyway, that is it. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.